All right, Marianne, as you know, we're in the Thinking Through My Fingers, a writer series. So oh, I love that expression, thinking through my fingers, because I think those of us who write, whether it's for pleasure or in the hopes of having some kind of inspiration or impact elsewhere, that is kind of how we express ourselves. And I know you do a lot of writing in addition to your writing projects. You write pretty much every day. So why do you think you write? Why do you write?
Actually, from a practical standpoint, I feel like being able to write something that someone can have in their hands and reference and read at different times, different junctures when the need arises for the particular information that I have written about, that's a gift to them, that they don't have to, that it makes it easier for them to have access to the ideas, examples, stories, tips. And one reason I wrote the book that I wrote was because I wanted to provide a way for people to have easy access to these best practices I learned over 20 years of working in industry that they could put to use in a very practical way. Hence again why I'm nonfiction reader writer. I think when things have a usefulness, a practical application, it just makes a huge difference. At least that's what it's done for me. And readers have said that they're finding that does it for them as well.
Oh, absolutely. And listeners, just so you know, I have read Marianne's book. So Marianne, tell us the name of the book and the basic gist of it.
It's called Your Story for God's Glory, a Christian's Guide to Sharing Your Faith with Confidence, Clarity, and Impact.
Mm.
And the book really focuses on four guiding principles as modeled by Jesus that help Christians and really anyone of faith to share their testimony and other faith messages in a clear and confident way. And these four principles that are shared not only for what they are and how they can help, but then I use 30 different people's stories to illuminate how someone might put them into practice. And those people are from a variety of ages, from 13 to 70 something, backgrounds, from a gang leader to someone who's come over here as an immigrant to an executive. So just a variety of backgrounds, ages, and things that they might have been through in order to share that.
Well, and that just shows us that it's possible. I mean, you don't, there are no pre-required, there are no requirements. Anybody can really do this, and you've laid it out in really simple terms.
Which is why I like to use principles instead of steps. There's maybe a few steps within the principles that could be put into practice. But like you said, there's not hard and fast rules because our faith testimony, our personal stories are personal and they're going to show up in a number of different ways. But so often people aren't sure, well, how do I do that? And how do I do that in 5 or 10 minutes, not an hour and a half? What are some things that could be helpful to really connect what you want to share with the listener in a way they can receive it?
Hmm, so good, such a great point. How do you write? Do you have a certain process, a certain ritual? You have to do it longhand, you have to start on the computer, or all of the above? I mean, what I just think it's so interesting to find out.
Oh, well, you heard me share this at one point in our conversation along our life's journey is I write, but I don't love to write. 'Cause I grew up not being able to spell. I was held back in second grade because I had to listen to phonics records and I couldn't do
Oh,
anything with English or spelling. And so I always felt like I wasn't qualified and it was very hard. And so when I initially decided that I did want to put these things I was teaching into a book form or a workbook form, it took a little bit to find my rhythm because I had a lot of self-talk that wasn't positive about it. And you misspell a word, it stops you. And instead of taking the creative process and keep you moving, I might like go try to look the word up or do a spell check or something. And I had to let go of all that and just say, let me just let this flow. So then I just started taking out and writing longhand and taking things because I did like that idea of longhand and I would pray over it and I would think about it. And so I had notebooks that I could put them in and then I started transferring that over to the computer and using Word docs and storing that in the cloud. So if I lost the book, I wouldn't lose all of it. Which I once heard Bob Goff say that he wrote when he wrote his second book, he had it in the back of his car, and somebody in San Francisco broke into his car and stole his suitcase, or his suitcase, and the whole book was in there. He didn't have it backed up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn a lesson from him. Back this thing up. So for me, it is the process: written, longhand, then take it to computer, and then start massaging it.
So interesting because we're all different, and I enjoy and appreciate how everybody is different. And, just my curiosity just wonders, some of the nuts and bolts of that. So you told us a little bit about your book. What did you learn about you through the writing process?
I've heard this is similar to other authors. I just want to give it all. I
Ah,
just want to give drawing on 20 years of experience. I have all these ideas, tips, things I've covered over the years and learned, and I just want to give it all. But, I also know less is more, and giving it all is too much. So it was a real discipline. I had to learn to let go of things and step back from things and take a look from kind of a new look from how the reader might view it. Because when I'm in a workshop or a classroom environment, I can fill the gaps in. If I see a quizzical look, I can follow it up. If I need to emphasize something, I can pause for effect, or maybe make a bolder statement about it. Those things don't always come through in a book. And so I had to figure out, like, okay, how do I get some of my personality into it? So that was another layer of, writing these scenes down. But now how do I go back and ensure it's got a little bit more of my personality into it? Because I can almost be too rigid,
okay.
too practical. And so it was a ebb and flow in that. Um, I also learned it takes time and to allow the process to unfold. Uh, this process for me of this book took 5 years, I'm gonna say. Off and on, pick it up, put it down, things in life happen. But also, I don't know, there's some kind of quote out there about, the book has to almost birth itself, or I don't have that. I don't think that's the right quote, but it's the idea that when you rush it, it doesn't necessarily unfold into what it truly was meant to be.
Mhm.
And so I learned to allow that process to unfold. And if it took a little bit longer than I had really wanted, I just had to become okay with that.
Right. Well, that's a good thing to learn throughout different parts of our lives, right?
Yeah.
Not just in writing, but in all kinds of different ways.
One,
Um,
one more one more thing I can share too, that I learned, that it's okay to have help.
ah,
And what I mean by that is, um, I knew what content I wanted to write and things like that, but I didn't understand this whole create a book process. So editors, and that there's different types of editors. There's someone who does the book cover, and there's someone who does the book back cover, and there's someone that helps you with endorsements. There's somewhere, I mean, that, getting those people corralled together. And then that's just the inside of the book. Now, if you start getting to how do you get this thing loaded on Amazon, and how do you format it so it fits on what Amazon's going to produce, or Barnes and Noble, or whoever is
right,
distributing the book.
right.
So and allowing myself to use some of those people, and to help navigate those pieces that aren't necessarily content driven. So I wrote the book, but the idea is, I realized there was a lot of extra steps, and I had to learn to be okay with, it's all right to delegate those or hire for those,
Right,
so that I could keep things moving while I was still writing.
right. That's a really good point. And it seems like a lot of other people that we've been talking to have been saying similar things like, oh my
Okay.
gosh, there's so much to this, so much more than you think. I'll just write it and then put it out. But no, there's there's more to
We
it.
wish, right?
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who might want to try writing?
I think the first and foremost is, following on this last comment I just said, don't let anyone, even those you have hired, hijack your main message of
Oh,
your book, or the main purpose of your book, and who you intended it for, because they come in with good ideas, good things they've learned over time. But the reality is, at least for myself, I felt like God put this project in my hands, and I needed to assess when I was given feedback, do I keep that feedback and use it? Or do I keep going forward, which often for me meant sitting down and praying about it and feeling, seeing, sensing what was right. And over time, that is what really I think played out is it truly became the book I wanted it to become, that I felt God put in my hands, and stayed true to that. But it
Yeah,
can be easy to have those people who are well intended, and you may have even have hired them for their expertise, like certain editors. Um, they're not necessarily coming from the same perspective. So just making sure that you don't have that happen. Um, Along with that, not letting the deadline drive you. I mean, that's kind of a theme you're hearing from me is it's real easy for me to say, hey, I want to have that by January 1st or whatever that date is. And the reality is sometimes everything just can't come together that well. And you might shortcut something that you shouldn't if you
yeah.
get too stuck on the deadline. So have a deadline to motivate you, but hold it loosely in the context of the process.
Oh, I like that. Motivate, but don't hold it too tight. Yeah.
It's kind of like when I help people with their speeches or their testimonies. You want to understand what you're about to say. You want to be prepared so that you can be clear, and so you can release your mind to listen and see the audience. Um, but if you are too scripted and feel tied to that, then you're also going to potentially defeat what could be a really authentic and wonderful talk that you share. And so have a sense of what you want to do, but don't be so married that you can't release that and let it unfold in a way it needs to.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that's
I think that's a little bit what I go with on that.
yeah, I think that's a really important point because it's that read the room, right? The
Yeah.
reading the room kind of notion, that getting that feeling of having to pivot a little bit or wanting to.
Yeah.
Um,
One more thing I would
yes,
probably like to share, and this just came up recently. I was in a conversation, so I wanted to share it. Is I did not realize until a mutual friend of ours let me know that the year in which you write your book and publish it is the only year you can go for certain awards and certain recognition in the industry. And luckily, that was shared with me. So, for example, the San Diego Library does a annual local artist showcase, and they
mhm,
invite lots of people in. You get to share about your book, read a little bit about from it, and then they showcase it for the whole next year. Well, but you have to submit that only in the year in which you wrote it. So if I would have waited till the next year to do that, it would have been a lost opportunity.
right.
And there's several organizations out there that are very credible, very nice to give you some added, I guess, exposure, but can only be done in the year in which you wrote the book.
Who knew? My
So I found myself in December shipping off a few books to some organizations that do award. They read the book and rank you and award, give certain awards for it. And I wouldn't have been privy to those if, or wouldn't have made them in a timely way if I hadn't known that.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to clarify about your expertise in this area of helping people share their story is that for, I think it was over 20 years. Tell us why you have this expertise in helping somebody write a story, write their own story, their own.
Oh, so what is my background or what kind of brought me to this point?
We're alluding
Um,
to it, but we haven't really said it.
yeah, and this is a little bit of thinking back to the success, taking success to significance.
Mm,
Is for the last 20 years, I have worked with executives and staff and people in industry, customers like Johnson and Johnson, Genentech, General Atomics, Home and Garden TV. Some brand names out there people know, helping their people share their talks that they have to give at industry conferences and or important meetings and those types of things. And about 10 years ago, the Lord put on my heart that I could take those industry skills and use them for kingdom purposes, for God's purposes. And so I started then helping people share their story at San Diego Rescue Mission, Teen Challenge, at my church. at women's organizations that had a desire for their ladies to get to know each other through story, such as Chronicles that you and I met at and worked in. And so that the things I learned through the 20 years experience in industry, many of them do transfer over to how do we best tell our own story. Because these executives, I was helping them to share the information they had so it didn't come across just as as information, but as a story that could be received well and acted upon easily, where too much information often makes that not happen.
Right. And I think that it makes it so much more interesting for the listener if it's not just spewing out information, but if it's told in some kind of a story form that we might be able to relate to or learn from, it makes it,
Yeah,
we're going to be far more engaged.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you want readers? I think well, I already know the answer to this, but I want to ask you too. What do you want readers to take away if they read your book? What do you want them to take away?
That their story matters. That
Yes.
everyone has a story someone needs to hear that can encourage hope, ignite faith, and connect them at a heart level with you, the person sharing the story, and the Lord, if you're sharing about Him. And so the idea is that we all have a story that can benefit someone else. I think we're intended as creations of God to share those stories because
Right.
it's our way to connect with each other and support each other and help each other. And so if the reader left feeling more comfortable doing that and hopefully a little bit more equipped to do that so their confidence would step in. And I like to
Mhm.
say we want to be able to step up so God can step in and really help this person get to the next place.
Right.
And so that would be it.
Mhm. And as somebody who's read it, it's it's inspirational and it's informational. I mean, there's very much a how to, and then all the great examples you mentioned, the different stories that are in there of, other people who have used your guidelines and your structure and have made such an incredible difference.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very exciting. So will you continue to write?
I will, I'd say in the short term, I'm not targeting any next book. But I want to improve upon the curriculum I already have and just make this even more accessible and easy for people to uh, be able to tap into to help them tell their story with compassion, authenticity, and also with credibility.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. How can people find you?
They can find me at Marianne, which is MARYANN at Kingdom Presenters with an S.com. That's my website and email. And my book, Your Story for God's Glory, can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, probably anywhere you can get a book.
Wonderful. Is there anything else that you didn't get to say that you'd like to say?
I would just like to encourage again that your listeners think about and embrace the wonderful story that God's given them, the life they've lived, the journey they've been on, and that there's so many different ways they can encourage others through their story. And so to embrace that and know that their story matters.
Yes, beautiful. Well, I totally, totally believe that myself. So, and I think that's one of the many reasons we are kindred spirits.
Yes, I love it. And I love the
Uh,
unabashed you. Just is about being you. And these
yes,
stories is about being you as well. And
yes,
so we need
yes,
to embrace our authenticity and the compassion we have to share with others.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Marianne, once again. Such a pleasure to have you here, and I'm so happy to be doing life with you.
Thank you, Rechelle. Such a pleasure to know you and be with you.
Thanks.